presented sort of like the capstone class for everything that Bruce has taught us at Baker. We tried to do him proud and incorporate all that into this. You guys will have to be the judge whether we succeeded or not. Again, we all know that Bruce has been on the cover of GQ before and is known for his dress. This happens to be, Ward Malley's has been talked about a couple of times today. In Ward's case, it was all out of respect. In Bruce's case, I'm not sure how much respect we had. But this was when Ward was presented the ASCC Lifetime Achievement. And Bruce got the dress code. He's supposed to wear a coat and tie. So thank you. Okay, we're going to talk about National Veterans Memorial Museum. It's in Columbus, Ohio. Construction started in 2015. Grand opening was in 2018. A lot of you know how many people know who John Glenn is?
John Glenn?
John Glenn.
Yeah.
I asked that question at universities where I showed this, and nobody knows who John Glenn is. He was the first astronaut.
Well, he is the drummer for the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
But anyway, it was his idea to do this. It ended up being built in Columbus, Ohio, and he was a senator from Ohio, which is how it ended up there. This is the pillar of the mission. I'm not going to run through that in the interest of time, but this is a project, downtown Columbus, as it's finished. And the architect was Allied Works, the engineers, Nippers Advanced Engineering. There is very little on this job that is, there are very few right angles. There's a math term, and maybe Professor Supernaut can tell me what it is that describes what this is, but it was, without them, there's no way we could have built this project. That's the only right angles on the project, and that is the elevator or pit. So what we did in pre-construction, we went through and looked at all each of the separate cores were all laid out. Pre-construction wise, there was discussion, do you build this? These are all circles, and the question was, do you start at the bottom and pour it up like in 20-foot lifts and then come back again and do a second lift all the way around, or do you build it full height and work yourself around? There were 3 different contractors that looked at it, and there were 3 different ways to build the project. So you see the different placements there. That's what it looks like, each of the individual cores. As you look at right here where all these X's are, and I think there's 11 of them throughout the job, each of those, the engineer knew that there was going to be some cracking. He didn't know how much. And so when you see some resteel later, you'll see epoxy rebar there. He wanted that there because of the cracking and to avoid corrosion. Mock-ups. We heard today from a couple of speakers about the importance of mock-ups. Here we are doing that. This was in the winter, and you can see here we are putting in one of these X cages with the rebar in our mock-up. Afterwards, we did a post-mortem in terms of what we needed to do. Certainly one of the things we realized, if you look here, our dowels aren't quite in alignment with what that is, so that was something that we had to change. There's the final mock-up, and it was there for the balance of the job. Geometry was the real enemy and the real challenge on this particular job. Our project manager is an architect by education, and had done a lot of foam core work back in his college days, and he built this little model, but you can sort of see here where these different planes where they intersect, some of the challenges that were there. Part of what we had to decide as we made these cores, so the red and the green was which cores have to go first because of the embeds and the way different things were on this in a lot of different situations. But here you can see the geometry. You can see here, and this is on a sloped plane. It's just on a flat plane. It was pretty intricate. There's the formwork, what we had to do. One of the things that came up after the fact that nobody had considered, we had asked the question of the engineer, is that wall capable of supporting itself until it's tied in? It's sort of like, you know, when you build an arch, you know, it's not real stable until you put the, whatever it's called, the keystone in. He says, no, we forgot about that, and no, it will not support itself. So all this bracing is something that was not in our bid. It all got changed. One of the things we did on this job is we were scared to death of all architectural concrete, and in the budget phase, our budget was twice what the other two bidders were. And so we didn't get the job. They did the pre-construction. There was a contractor that got the job, and literally just before he was supposed to start, he walked out on the contract. He didn't sign it. He sent a letter saying we back out. And so we got a call from Turner, and we basically negotiated a cost-plus contract. Again, a couple of people mentioned risk. We limited risk. And we were actually a partner with Turner on this because they had a guaranteed max. So on a guaranteed max job, we got a T&M contract from Turner. And we worked, people were very willing to listen to ideas. Here you can see just some of the formwork and the shoring that we had to have. Here you can see all the embeds that go in. We had a presentation on metal deck. There's metal deck that went in all this. But you can see where all these intersections, if you look at that there, where the concrete comes in. And this was all in one pour. Reinforcing steel. What was very interesting on this job, we had Boris, this was Herbie was on this, he was on your job. But one of our best ironworker superintendents was on this job. And some of these, we pre-tied these cages. The heaviest one weighed 110 tons. And he couldn't do the calculations intuitively. He knew where the whip points were, but Turner wasn't going to listen to that. We had to have a critical whip plan. And it was his son who works for us, who's an engineer, who basically engineered all that for his dad. It's pretty interesting. So here we are whipping these cages. And somebody's sitting here with me. You work for us? Yep. Okay, so those are EFCO super studs. Now, anybody that's worked with super studs knows those are pretty stiff numbers. They just bent. I mean, as this cage was being lifted, that weighed 110 tons, they just moved like a piece of red spaghetti as we were doing that. There we are putting it into place. Most of those happened on a Saturday, and they took about 8 hours to put into place. Concrete placements, we use self-consolidating concrete, and most of our pours we did at night. And we used 2 pumps. We had pumping ports. Here you can see a pump. So we started here, and then this has been done, and had several crews working on this. So here we took and separated each of the pours, you know, through BIM and pre-planned what each of the pour sizes were, and calculated how many yards were in each one of these. These are the pumping ports, and we typically would have, with one line, we'd be pumping into 2 ports at a time, and then had a spade valve that we would lower and then pump up to the next port is what we would do. Again, just the same way, some of what we had to do from a placing standpoint. Perry is who supplied all the formwork. And as you looked at the formwork, it was sort of a honeycomb deal. They were all in radiuses. And the tolerance on the formwork, they wanted to be within 1/8 of an inch. And so there were times on this radius, there were times we'd lift it up into place, we'd measure it, it wouldn't be right, we'd have to lower it down, crank the formwork to get it to the right tolerance. It was very, very challenging. This is sort of, so if you look here, you can see the detail work. And remember, this is like 40 foot up in the air. One of the challenges we had in Ohio, we're a union contractor, we had a bunch of our 18 guys that were on this job, that's for sure. But as we got carpenters out of the hall, Some of them weren't willing to listen to what we were doing. They thought they had some better ideas. We ended up hiring about a dozen apprentices on this job, Peter, and most of them are still working for us. But they had no bad habits, and they were great to work with. And, but it was a very interesting job as we went through here. But again, Bruce, lots of things that you had taught us about the importance of pre-planning, expectations. The thing was certainly the mock-up that we had was very, very important. And the architect was very happy with what ended up happening. So there you can see the structure. So this is an area where they have events up here. You can rent this place out for different activities. There it is at sunset, just an amazing place. This is the lobby, and the pillars that were talked about are listed on that wall. This is dedicated. We have any veterans in the room? So, yep, you're the only one. Thank you very much. But this is meant to honor all the veterans, and it goes all the way back to George Washington, the Revolutionary War, and comments that he had. You're not going to find a rifle, you're not going to find a tank or an artillery piece in this museum. It is all about the thoughts of the veterans, and that captured throughout all the wars that our veterans have fought in and defended our country. So it's an amazing place to go through. If you're in Columbus, Ohio, I would recommend going through it. Grand opening, Owen Powell was the speaker, and right here, this is a retired Army general. He's the curator of the museum that's there today. And again, here's Bruce again, talking about war. And we all know that Ward did the heavy lifting in this dynamic duo case, and that's all I had. I tried to speed it up.